Hi, this is the 426 episode online hangout for engineering ethics at New Jersey Institute of Technology. We're on lesson 14. We are almost done with this semester. Let's go ahead and jump into the lesson. So lesson 14, this week we're talking about technological unemployment. For the last few weeks we've been talking about artificial intelligence and robotics taking over the world. Lesson 12 we talked about artificial intelligence sort of abstractly. Lesson 13 we talked about automation in warfare and in the service sector. So lesson 14 this week, I'm going to mute your mic. Lesson 14 this week, we're dealing with technological unemployment. What happens when computers take our jobs? So this is a normal week. You have a normal post to do this week, a quiz on some of the reading. Lesson 15 is our final week, so next week is our final week. I will be having a hangout on Tuesday of next week at the normal time, but it'll just be short. I'll just say goodbye. Lesson 15, you're asked to post as normal, but there's no replies due for lesson 15. There's no quiz due for lesson 15. Lesson 15 is due by Friday night as normal, so on the 6th at midnight. That's also when all extra credit assignments are going to be due. So remember, there's an extra credit assignment due for lesson 11. That'll also be due by the 6th. I've mostly caught up on the grading. There's still a few students in section 4 and in section 456 that have not had their lesson 11 and 12 graded. Apart from those, everyone else should be graded. What I'm going to ask everyone to do. Let me put myself back on screen. I'm going to ask everyone if you could wait until this Friday when I should be completely done with all the grading and have all the attendance grading and everything online. After this Friday, I will send out an email to everyone letting everyone know their grades. And then from that point on, please send me emails if you find any mistakes in your grading. If you find old lessons that haven't been graded, missing grades, if you find mistakes in the grading, let me know, send me an email, and when you send me those emails, please send a link to the grades that you're missing. That helps me do it really quickly. Otherwise, I have to search for you among all the classes. Please wait till Friday. At Friday, you can send me emails if you still find missing grades, and then everything's going to be due next Friday, Friday the 6th. And then that's the class, and then we're over. I think you might be able to do the online evaluation of the course right now. Please evaluate the course. Let me know which lessons you liked, which lessons you didn't like. Let me know what activities worked for you, what case studies you enjoyed. If you're thinking of any way of improving this course, something like 250 students at NJIT go through this course every semester. So anything you can tell me to help improve the course will make a better experience for all those people. I'm looking forward to your evaluations. Yeah, attendance, the plan is to have complete grades by Friday, not including the things that you turn in on Friday, but everything else should be done by Friday, including attendance. So if you see any missing grades after Friday, please send me emails and I'll catch up on those. All right, so let me go ahead and jump back into the lesson. So lesson 14, technological unemployment. Here we're talking about what happens when these machines take our jobs. So we started talking about artificial intelligence in lesson 12, but the really important issue is automation, is automating these technologies so that they can perform on their own. When these technologies are automated, it changes the kind of workload that human beings have to do. In fact, you can think of the history of technological change as the development of more and more increasing automation. So initially, humans did work on their own, but eventually we started domesticating animals to pull the plows and to carry heavy loads and so on. So eventually the animals were taking up these jobs for us. The animals are autonomous to a certain extent, except you have to feed them and so on. As we replace these with robots that are even more autonomous, more self-sufficient, and require less maintenance on our part, it's because of having autonomous machines in this way that humans are able to accomplish so much of what we're able to do, not including the robots that we have on Mars, doing science on Mars,
Professor, you're muted.
I'm muted. Oh no, I'm sorry. How long have I been muted? I was
About 15 to 20 seconds.
okay. I guess that automatically muted me somehow. I'm sorry about that.
It says Mina muted you on my chat, but I don't.
Oh yeah, that might have been what happened. Thank you for.
No problem.
Do you remember what I was saying last?
Replace animals, and then.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
So yeah, so we were replacing animal labor. Replacing animal labor with more increasingly automated labor. Um. Uh. Yeah, and so what I was saying, I guess, when I was muted, was that having robots take over these jobs allows humans to accomplish tasks that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So we've already seen this a couple of times with the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The oil well was leaking a mile below the surface of the ocean. We couldn't have any human beings down there; it was just too dangerous. So we had to have robots doing all the repairs. Similarly, the Fukushima disaster, whenever a nuclear reactor melts down or partially melts down, we need, it's a dangerous situation. You need to have machines that can handle those situations. So it's because we've automated so much of our labor that we can handle these situations where human beings alone wouldn't be enough. And you can see the history of labor. You can even see the history of technological development is this drive towards increasing automation. Right now, economists all over the world are predicting that automation will eliminate lots of jobs. I have this. This is the link to the paper. Did I actually have the link to the? Oh yeah, here we go. So on this link, there's a little survey where you can figure out if robots will take your job. You ask what kind of question, what kind of job do you have, and you can. So if I'm an engineer. Let's say I'm a mechanical engineer. So it's unlikely, it says that my job will be taken, 13% likelihood, if I'm a mechanical engineer, that my job will be taken. This is ranked 268th out of 366 jobs that are likely. Maybe what if I'm an electrical engineer? Also very likely. Engineering jobs in general, because they're highly skilled jobs, tend not to be subject to automation, but less skilled jobs. So for instance, a technician, say you're an electrical technician. So usually with these contracting jobs, you'll have one engineer who's certified, who has engineering credentials, and they hire a bunch of techs who aren't certified. And techs are very likely to be automated in the near future. So an electrical technician has a 83% chance that their job will be eliminated, meaning that that job can be taken over entirely by machines so that human beings don't need to do those jobs anymore. And you can see for whatever job, whatever career path you're choosing, you can go back and see there's a whole list of different jobs that you might have. And in fact, if you go to the actual article, they have the table that this is all derived from, where we can go through and see. Let me go down to the bottom of this article. Yeah, at the very bottom of this article, they have all the data where they're deriving all this. And so this is from least likely to be automated, recreational therapists, very unlikely to be automated, audiologists, to most likely. So let's go down and see who's most likely to be automated. So here we're at 80% likelihood of automation. Cooks, fast food cooks. Here's our technicians. Assemblers, installers, brick masons. Oh, no, I'm sorry, refractory material repairers except brick masons. Non-farm animal caretakers would be an automated job, an 18% probability. Cooks, cafeteria, sailors, marine oilers, railroad conductors, yardmasters. Right, these are all jobs that are likely to be automated because the task requires activities that our technology will soon be able to do without human assistance. Right, so these are jobs that robots can easily do. We saw this earlier, by the way, when we were talking about artificial intelligence initially, where the early computers.
Professor, you're echoing.
We saw this earlier, Am I echoing because of your laptop?
You.
Perhaps. Okay.
I just muted myself to check it, and nope. I'll relog.
Okay. So we saw this technological unemployment already happen when we started looking at the.
I'll relog. Okay.
Right. We saw the technological unemployment already happen with the invention of computers. Remember, where a computer was a job that a human being did, and then we were able to automate that job by building digital computers that can do this stuff without human intervention, without human assistance. And this is just going to happen more and more and more. So I have this video. A lot of the quiz questions come from this video. Humans need not apply. And this video, it's a short documentary, about 15 minutes. That's just going over the history of automation and where we are today with automation. One of the things that the video talks about is this robot here. This robot's name's Baxter. And Baxter is meant to be a robot that can operate in human factory settings alongside human beings. So in a typical, say, a car manufacturing plant, if you go into a car manufacturing plant, there's going to be a lot of robots there. A lot of the jobs are automated. This is one of the reasons why the industry in the United States is so bad, is because a lot of these jobs that used to be human jobs are now taken over by robots. And so you see, here's a factory floor where there's a bunch of these machines, and these are all robots, and there's no human being on them. These are machines all building these cars. But you notice that these machines are walled in, gated in, because they're really dangerous machines. And if a human being is anywhere near them, they risk a lot of danger to themselves. So these machines have to be gated and sort of sequestered from human interaction. This is a no human zone. But that's difficult because a lot of our environments are built for humans, and we want our robots to be able to share these environments because that's where we're doing our work also. So Baxter is supposed to be a human-safe robot it won't swing its arms wildly and knock you over. It knows to stop when it hits someone. Let's go back and find Baxter here. Yeah, so you can work around Baxter. And you can also train Baxter. Baxter can learn with really simple human commands. So if you want Baxter to perform an action, like folding the shirt, what you do is you actually grab the arms and move them in the positions that you want them to be moved. And then Baxter will learn that gesture, learn that behavior, and then can repeat it in sort of an assembly line way. Now Baxter is not a very sophisticated machine. It's actually kind of clumsy, and it doesn't work very well. But it's the beginning of general purpose robots that you can put in any work environment that can handle lots of different kinds of tasks. I will just briefly, just the other day I saw a robot go through my stream. Let me find it. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, just the other day this robot came through my stream. This robot is a part picker. So this robot can grab little things out of these little blue containers and put them on shelves. It looks like kind of a trivial task until you realize that this is the only task left for human beings on the Amazon warehouse floor. So today, Amazon warehouses, anytime you order anything from Amazon, it's being delivered to you mainly by robots, these little robots here. These robots were developed by a company called Kiva Systems, which Amazon bought for $1 billion a couple of years ago. And these robots move autonomously on the factory floor. Whenever there's a product that's ordered, these robots will go find the shelf that it's on, drive to it, get underneath the shelf, and then pick it up. I'll go ahead and let it play out a little bit. Yeah, so these robots, so they're picking up these shelves and they're moving them, and I'll just fast forward a little bit. What they do is they move them to a human who's at a station. The human stationary, just stands there. And, every time an order comes up, they grab the part out of the shelf, put it in the box, and then the robot takes the shelf back. So this is the only human job on the Amazon factory floors to get these parts out of the shelf. And the reason you need a human to do it is because the robots aren't delicate enough to actually grab these small items out of a shelf full of a bunch of other complicated items. So it's really only because the humans have the dexterity, the small hands, to grab things in shelves and put them in boxes that this isn't yet automated. But Amazon is very interested in automated because humans are really expensive for labor. So for the past couple of years, Amazon has had this picking challenge. They did it last year, and they're doing it again this year. And it's a big robotics challenge. I'll turn this off. It's a big robotics challenge. It's a big robotics challenge to try to build a robot that can actually successfully pick apart from a shelf. I won't play this, but you can see for yourself. So this is a good example of how this stuff is automated. In the past, this kind of job, there'd be dozens, hundreds maybe, of personnel on the factory floor, hundreds of jobs that people had doing all these jobs. But now it's reduced to just a couple of human jobs, mostly an automated factory. Right. So when you order from Amazon, it's robots bringing those products to your door. Because robots have these jobs, these are fewer and fewer human jobs. Maybe let me just show the OSH bot. Yeah. So this is a little retail bot. The point here is that not all these automated jobs are for technical jobs, for highly sophisticated technical jobs, but they're also for menial jobs, right? So this is works at Lowe's or whatever department store, and the robot will greet you at the door, ask you questions to figure out what you're looking for, and then direct you to your part. It can speak multiple languages. It never gets tired. It doesn't have to go on cigarette breaks, right? It doesn't. It's not. Doesn't complain about other employees and so on in the break room. Right, so this is the kind of job that a high school teenager might have had just a few years ago, but this is the job that a robot has now. Well, that means less jobs, fewer and fewer jobs for human beings. And that makes some people mad. So let me see. Yeah, so that makes some people mad. So this is a billboard taken out in San Francisco a few years ago when there was a push to raise the minimum wage in San Francisco in California to $15. That $15 California minimum wage increase actually happened, so this bill went through. But a lot of people, employers especially, were against it because higher minimum wage means more of their profits go to paying for their employees. So some employer took out this ad saying, well, if you want a minimum wage to be $15, well, here's your replacement, an iPad, may I take your order? And in fact, you see this all over the place in McDonald's and other kinds of fast food places where these services are increasingly automated. So back 100 years ago, these problems aren't new at all. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, there was a group called the Luddites, led by General Ned Ludd in England. This is early part of the Industrial Revolution, and a bunch of workers at a factory lost their jobs to a bunch of new machines. These weren't small, tiny machines, sophisticated robots like the Kiva robots. These were big, smog-spewing industrial machines in a big early industrial factory. But they were taking human jobs, and the humans decided that that wasn't right, that they deserved those jobs. And so one night, those factory workers stormed the factory and destroyed all the new machines. 200 stocking frames were destroyed. Big, expensive machines. In fact, because these machines were destroyed, there was an act passed, the Frame Breaking Act, that convicted people of breaking these machines to death. So it was a crime punishable by death to kill these machines. Right. So this is some of the first legal protections of machines in response to these early labor conflicts from industrialization. And we're seeing the same thing today. Right. We're seeing people backlash against automation today as well. I don't really have a whole lot I want to say here. Mostly I want to just direct you to this Humans Need Not Apply video for you to look at that, to think about the Luddites, and if something similar, some kind of backlash against this automation. Personally, I think some of this backlash might come to the automated cars. We were talking about automated cars a little bit last week. Especially in the United States, people have people are very romantic about their cars. People have a lot of feelings about their cars. It's part of the American dream in some respects. And so taking away people's ability to drive their cars, to step on the gas and just go, because now a robot's driving you everywhere, and you have to abide by these mechanical chauffeurs. Not only that, but some of these cars on the road, they might drive slower than other people. They might make mistakes and cause accidents. People might get really mad at these cars on the road. They might demand to discriminate against these cars on the road. Put them in their own lane. Maybe all the autonomous vehicles belong in their own lane, and the humans cannot have their own lane. Maybe put a wall between them so that the robots can't cause crashes among the humans. Right? This is a kind of Luddite revolt, right? This is a kind of response to the automation, right? That the automation is somehow attacking us, and it needs a coordinated response. Yeah, was there a comment?
We're talking about this as like it already happened and how it could happen again. But I feel like we also need to talk about the responses to it, because this is not a new thing anymore. Automated technical revolution has, what's the term, precedent. So there's also the industrial response to this, just like unions can have conflicts with companies and they get used to each other. Couldn't companies have already foreseen this issue and then proposed solutions?
To automation?
Yeah.
Which issue in particular are you talking about?
A lack of human requirement. Because moving one thing to another used to be a human job, and now it's a robotic job. But what if there was an additional job created for that, like a 1-to-1 ratio or something?
Okay. I mean, so this seems to miss the point of automation, right? So part of the point of automation is, first of all, it's cheaper because you don't have to hire the people. And second of all, it's faster, quicker, more efficient than a person. So if you're having a 1-to-1 hiring ratio, then you don't get any of those benefits because you still got to hire the people. Maybe it becomes more efficient. I'm sorry?
That would be a perfect case scenario, 1-to-1. All it does is just make people more intellectual labor than physical labor.
Yeah, but you still have to pay them for that labor.
Yeah, I recognize that. That would be like the perfect case.
The perfect case for who? It may be the perfect case for the workers, but it wouldn't be the perfect case for the business owners who don't like the cost of human labor and would prefer. I mean, in the same way that it's expensive to feed your horses, and it's a lot cheaper to have a car. Maybe the car is initially more expensive, but over the long run, you're spending less on the car than you are on the horses. Maybe. Yeah. Well, then what do we do with all the horses? Well, there just aren't any more horses, right? Horses aren't as important anymore. So there's this shift from a whole social system built around the assumption that there's horses everywhere and that everyone's using horses all the time, to an assumption that everyone's using cars all the time. And what you're going to see with technological automation going forward is the same kind of radical changes into the social infrastructure, to the very way that we organize ourselves. If we can assume that all the cars on the road are automated, and that delivery, self-driving trucks and so on, all this stuff is automated, you don't have to pay people to do it. That changes a lot of the assumptions about how we organize these things. So, for instance, the United States relies very heavily on truck transportation all across the country, and those trucks are all driven right now by human beings, and that implies certain things about the time frames for delivery. A truck driver can't drive for more than 16 hours without having to stop, but an automated car might be able to drive the whole time, right? And so it might be able to make deliveries faster. And when you can count on faster deliveries, you can change other kinds of features of social structure. Yeah, Bailey, do you want to jump in?
I get what you're saying, and I got that before, where the whole idea of automation is to make things faster, better, cheaper, easier to do. But I was having this discussion in one of my other classes as well, and I'm concerned that trying to make a better world through automation will make it worse as a consequence of a lack of jobs, of a lack of ability to survive, essentially. So you're going to get this situation where the working class is dying off, and they recognize that, and they revolt. Like the Luddites, but much more violent, especially given our position on firearms. Does that make sense?
I didn't catch the connection to firearms, but you're worried about people not having jobs and that people need jobs, and that that people will be hurt by the process of automation.
Like,
I mean, this is exactly the same thing that the Luddites were worried about, right? This is why the Luddites destroyed all those factories, because they thought that those factories should be operated by people, right? People needed those jobs. People need those jobs to live, right? You can't feed yourself if you don't have a job, and so it's wrong to the people to take these jobs away from the people and give them to the machines.
what is it? What the myth of progress, right? Everything is better with progress.
Yeah, I mean, right. So I mean, it might be some form of progress. It might be progress for the bottom line of the business, but it's a social regress because you're leaving all these people behind, separating the gap between the rich and the poor. I could go off about communism here, about owning the means of production, right? It's the capitalists who own the means of production. They don't actually care about the laborers who are actually doing the work, generating all the stuff. They just care about the profits that they get from owning the means of production. And so if you can get rid of all those laborers, then you make more money, right? So this is capitalism at work. And the idea is that automation is just a function of capitalism, and the human rights issues, the rights of the people, the laborers, don't enter into that. Now, Bailey, you mentioned earlier that one of the consequences of these early industrial precedents for these technological changes were things like unions, right? So one of the things that we did early in the Industrial Revolution, because the capitalists weren't
Playing fair?
yeah, they weren't playing fair and they weren't acknowledging labor rights, is that the workers unionized and they formed collectives where they could collectively bargain for their rights. This is why we have weekends. This is why we have an 8-hour workday. This is why we have a 15-minute, breaks and so on. These are all things that people fought and died for hundreds of years. Nowadays, though, unions are pretty weak, having been sort of systematically dismantled by the political infrastructure over the last 30 years or so. But I want to sort of push back against the idea that this automation is bad for us, or that the idea that people not having jobs is a bad thing. So this is a quote from Buckminster Fuller. We should do away with the absolutely specious notion that everybody has to earn a living. It is a fact that 1 in 10,000 of us can make a technological breakthrough capable of supporting all the rest. The youth of today are absolutely right in recognizing the nonsense of earning a living. We keep inventing jobs because of this false idea that everybody has to be employed at some kind of drudgery because, according to Malthusian Darwinian theory, he must justify his right to exist. So we have inspectors of inspectors and people making instruments for inspectors to inspect inspectors. The true business of people should be to go back to school and think about whatever it was they were thinking about before someone came along and told them they had to earn a living. Right, so Buckminster Fuller here is saying that the idea that people have to earn a living is already specious. We already make more than enough to support everyone on Earth, to feed and clothe and house everyone on Earth. The idea that they have to work for that, and if they're not working, if they're not putting in 8 hours of work a day, whatever, then they don't deserve it. This is just nonsense. We can supply all this stuff for everyone, and not everyone has to work. I want to maybe have you recall some of our discussion of ants. I don't know if I've talked about ants in the Hangout, but not all ants do work. About 50% of the ants in any one colony are just standing around doing nothing. That doesn't make the colony collapse. In fact, it's necessary to have all those ants around, even if they're not doing anything. And you can think the same thing for human beings, that human beings don't need, it's not the case that all human beings need to be working 8 hours a day, and that if you're not, you don't deserve anything. we can provide for everyone, whether or not they work. Not everyone's capable of working. Lots of people have disabilities or other reasons why they can't put in a full day's labor, and that's fine. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have enough to feed them. We're still going to have enough to feed them and everyone else. So we need to get away from this idea that people need to earn a living. And from this perspective, you might think that automation is a good thing for people. So, no, I got rid of it. Sorry. Automation. Oh, here we go. So there's a whole group of people talking about the future of work, about demanding a post-work future. And among the things that they're arguing is that we need to get out of the culture of demanding the people. I mean, so especially in the United States, we have this sort of the work ethic, I want to say puritanical work ethic, but that's not right. That's not the word. There's a very strong work ethic in the United States based on old cultural dispositions in the United States. But the idea that work is what makes you valuable, that itself can be undermined, right? So, this is demanding the post-work future. Four parts to this: full automation, embrace automation, not fear it. The automation of work should be a political goal, not a perceived inevitability. Why? Well, capitalists, just as Buckminster Fuller said, capitalism has provided us the abundance at the expense, has provided us with abundance at the expense of freedom. Automation should both enable freedom and abundance. Automation is a practical reality that we need to accept. Right, the idea is that we have enough to allow all these jobs to be automated. What we need to get rid of is the idea that people need to earn a living. Right? If we allow that people can, deserve food and clothing and shelter, right? Deserve all the basic things they need to survive, then it's fine if we automate everything. It's fine if they don't have a job because they get everything they need anyway. So full automation. A shorter work week. Here's one way of dealing with the fact that there's less jobs is make people work less, right? So if people were working a three-day week or a 4-day week, those additional jobs that they would be working those extra 2 or 3 days could go to someone else, right? So divide up the work among more people. That means every individual is going to be doing less work, which means that they're going to have an easier time. But all the work can still get done, right? Anything that can't get automated just gets divided up among more people. Right? Increased leisure. This is a way of dealing with automation. More laborers means strengthen labor bargaining potentially. The proposed way of doing this, right? This is not communism in the sense of just giving sort of merely giving everyone everything they need through some sort of centralized planning. This is a sort of hybrid system, and the thing that people are pushing very strongly for today is universal basic income. Right? The idea is that everyone gets minimum income every year. Everyone gets $30,000 a year, say. And that's about the money that they're looking at. $30,000 is not the lap of luxury by any stretch of the imagination, but $30,000 might feed you and clothe you and make it so that you're not worried about being destitute. Right? If giving everyone $30,000 a year means that we can end things like poverty and homelessness and so on, then maybe that's a really good idea. I will just note that there's 16 million children in poverty in the United States right now. 22% of all children. 22% of all children in the United States live in poverty. That's under $23,000 a year. Right. So if we're just giving everyone that amount of money, and I'm not saying that that's all the money they get, allowing them to supplement that money with work if they're working a few days a week, whatever, they can earn more. Right. This is not leveling everyone so that everyone is exactly equal, but it's just providing the basic safety net that everyone can build off of. So that's universal basic income. And then the thing that I've been talking about the whole time is devaluing the work ethic, right? Resisting the idea that one must work to have value in society, and that if you're not working, then you're a drain on society. That's not true at all. People who don't work do all sorts of other things for society. the best example of this by far, without a doubt, is domestic work, is the work that the mom does in the household. The job of raising children and maintaining a household is typically done by women, and it's almost universally unpaid labor. Right? This is labor that they're not being recognized for, they're not getting money for, they're not even being recognized in the economic environment, right? So the GDP doesn't reflect the labor being done in the household. Right. So the job, the work, and it's a ton of work to maintain a household and raise kids. It's probably the most important work that anyone does at all. But this work is completely unrecognized by our economic system. Right. It's not respected at all by the way that we value work. Right. So this is all supposed to be pointing to the idea that the way that we think about work might already have some problems, and that if we reorganize our culture of work so that we don't demand work, we don't think work is necessary for value, and that we do actually value the work that real people do, like housework that isn't already recognized. Right? These are some of the proposed ways of compensating or coping with these changes, technological automation, coming in the future. Yeah, so talking about universal basic income would be appropriate here also, and how universal basic income might deal with issues of technological unemployment. Talking about which jobs are being automated, and which jobs are safe, and maybe whether it's a good idea to move to these safe jobs. That's something you talk about also. One thing you might want to talk about that's interesting is what's called the sharing economy. You may have used services like Uber or Airbnb, Lyft. Right? So Uber, if you don't know, Uber is a taxi service, sort of, but it's not an official taxi service. So in order to drive a taxi, in most cities, you need a taxi medallion, and the medallions are expensive. Cities only give a few of them a year, and they're tightly regulated. And so for a long time, the only way to be a taxi driver was to hook yourself up with one of these taxi services that has access to all these medallions and so on. And it wasn't possible for someone to just take their car and give people a lift and make money off of it. But Lyft and Uber are attempting to do this, right? So with Uber, you can have an app on your phone and call up a car. That car is being driven by the owner of that car, and the entire transaction basically takes place between you and the owner of the car. That person doesn't have a medallion, right? So they're not technically a taxi service. And because they don't have a medallion, they escape a lot of the regulatory overhead, right? So it's expensive to maintain the medallion, it's expensive to maintain the taxi service and everything. But the individual driver only has to maintain their car. Now, there's troubles with this, and one of the resources I give is this digital labor conference from 2014. This is a little bit out of date, but they talk a lot about the service economy, or the sharing economy, and what it actually means from an economic standpoint. So Uber is trying to attract a lot of drivers to come drive for Uber instead of trying to become an official taxi driver. And the argument that Uber makes is that you get to keep a lot more of your profits. If you're a taxi driver, you have to give up part of your money to the taxi service that you're working for. But if you're an Uber driver, you give some of it to Uber, but you keep more of it than a taxi driver would. So Uber is trying to attract people this way. And the general claim of the sharing economy is that by sharing directly between people, instead of going through these centralized services, that we'll be able to save money, we'll be able to more efficiently distribute resources. I mean, after all, most people who own cars don't drive it at all. In fact, most cars spend 90% of their time or more just parked in a parking lot or in a garage. Right? That's an extremely expensive piece of equipment. A car is tens of thousands of dollars of machinery, of hardware, but that hardware isn't being used for anything most of the time. Right? So the idea of the sharing economy is, well, what if we can take those resources that are just sitting around unused and try to use them better? Right? So these unused cars, if they can get taken up by some system that can use them efficiently, right? So Airbnb is a hotel service. It's kind of like a hotel service, but where people are just sort of renting out their rooms. Right? If you have a spare room in your house, or if you have a second, a vacation house that you only use part of the year and you want to rent it out to Airbnb people the rest of the time, right? This is a service for doing that. The travel industry, the hotel industry is already a huge industry. They already make lots of money from this kind of service. But it's also a highly regulated industry, so there's lots of taxes that hotels have to pay for running these kinds of services. And the Airbnb people who are renting out rooms in their house, they don't have to pay those taxes. They don't have to subject themselves to the same regulations, and so they can do it cheaper. And so a lot of people are preferring this kind of sharing economy. But there's dangers about this. So in the Digital Labor Conference, they talk about how the taxi driver takes home less money directly because more money is going to the taxi service, and Uber is taking less money than the taxi service. So it looks like the Uber driver is taking home more money, but the taxi service also usually pays for the gas and the maintenance of the vehicle, which is a huge expense for taxi services. Whereas Uber drivers drive their own vehicles, which means that they're paying for all the gas and all the repairs, maintenance, if they have a flat tire or whatever. So the Uber driver is shouldering all that expense, and that's an expense that they don't really see on a daily basis. They wouldn't really know because most Uber drivers aren't in the business of running a taxi service. They're just doing this, on the side. Whereas a taxi service actually knows the expense of maintaining a fleet of vehicles, and so they factor that into their costs. But Uber drivers who aren't so experienced are sort of being fooled about how profitable it actually is because a lot of these costs are being hidden. Same thing for Airbnb, right? I mean, as we've seen all semester, there's a reason why these regulations exist. These regulations exist for the public safety and welfare. Maybe some regulations are unnecessary, but the point of the regulations is so that there can be some oversight, and so people aren't getting screwed by these systems, right? So Uber and Airbnb, these sharing economy services are trying to evade the regulatory structure, and that also means they evade all the safety and the safety checks and the fail-safes that are built into the existing regulatory structure. And so there are dangers with that. There are benefits of that. Lots of people have strong opinions on Uber. I live in New York. Lots of people here have very strong opinions about Uber. So talk about the sharing economy too. Talk about the impact of automation, the impact of these new technological services on employment and on the economy. This has all sorts of ethical implications for how we value labor, how we value human time. Yeah, so that's the lesson. Let me see if there's any questions, any more comments or questions from the group.
Basic income.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, it stinks distinctly of Star Trek-esque values, and...
Did you say stinks?
Yeah.
What's wrong with Star Trek values?
Mostly they're a post-scarcity society, and that's concerning. So, all a basic income does would be ensure you don't die of lack of basic needs.
Yes, and to provide some economic freedom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, God, what was it? Supplementary jobs as hobbies and such.
Mm-hmm.
So the question becomes is, how do you think that'll work out? Because as of right now, even with excess, people don't really believe in sharing. There's a huge portion of the world that views the world as a zero-sum gain system. So any work they do, wouldn't they be most unlikely to share it? And therefore, any supplementary income from things like art or culture will be negated. And what I'm essentially trying to point out is that I'm trying to point out that people don't really like sharing their hard work, even with the basic income. I don't see how you'd have a functional economy with a basic income. I think that's the words I want to say in the right order to make the proper question.
Yeah, good. So, uh, uh, so how would universal basic income actually work out? The honest answer is that we don't really know, and in fact, there's a lot of work right now trying to establish what happens. So there's a group that has been doing some experiments. There's a group called Give Directly that has been doing experiments in poor parts of the world, in Kenya, other parts of the world, where they just give poor people money, no strings attached. You just give them $1,000, a month or whatever, $1,000 a pay period, and no strings attached. It's very common in the United States to want to attach a bunch of strings to this. It's very common for conservatives to put strings on, for welfare recipients to put strings about drug use and so on. But it turns out that none of that is necessary. When you just give people money, the experiments right now are seeming to show that people use it in ways that benefit the general economy. People don't tend to spend it on, especially if they need this money to survive. People don't tend to waste this money on things that they don't need. People tend to spend it on things that they actually do need, like healthcare, like education, and like more and better food. Right, so improving their basic requirements. So we've known about we've run some. Give Directly has run some of these experiments already, but they're just starting the largest of these basic income experiments. This is from just a few weeks ago. They're giving thousands of people in Kenya an unconditional basic income. So this is the largest study of this kind, this basic income kind, ever conducted. It's by the same people, and their smaller experiments have already been very positive. So the expectation is that this is going to show that actually giving people money, it works. It works like you want it to work.
Problem?
Yeah.
I think a problem.
Oh, well, wait, before you give your problem, one thing you said before is that the problem that you mentioned before is that sometimes people just don't want to share, and that's certainly right. We saw from the recent Panama Papers where lots and lots of companies all around the world are stashing money away in these tax havens where they're not being taxed for it. Right? And this is people not sharing. Corporations in the United States are just as guilty of this as anyone else in the world. Right? These people trying to hide their money and not share it, and it's selfish. And these people are defectors. So we know from game theory that if you have defectors in a system, then the defectors tend to win, and the people who play fair tend to lose, and that's bad. And so we also know from game theory that our social our social tendencies are to exclude the defectors. In other words, if someone's a cheater, you have to catch them and you have to get them out of the game. Right? So if you exclude the cheaters, then you can build a stable system of people who play fair, as long as there's processes for identifying the cheaters and then excluding them from future games. If you don't catch the cheaters, though, if you just let them continue to cheat, then no one has any incentive to play fair, and the whole system collapses. Right? So as long as we have these tax havens where companies can refuse to share their money, as long as we have cheaters, and as long as we're not trying to catch those cheaters and bring them to justice, then that's going to be a problem. But what that means is that if we want universal basic income to work, we need to not let the rich steal from the poor. Right? We need to have these regulations that actually monitor what the wealthy do with the money.
That statement is concerning. The people who have the currency and the physical ability to monitor the wealthy are the wealthy, unless the poor dedicate a fair amount of their resources to monitoring the wealthy.
I mean, it's a challenge. It's definitely a political challenge. There's reasons to be optimistic. These empirical studies that are generating support for universal basic income is an empirical reason to be optimistic. The fact that we just passed a $15 minimum wage in California is another reason to be optimistic. Right? These suggest that there's... I'm sorry?
The $15 minimum wage just shoved automation forward a couple of years at minimum, if you're looking at it, the response to the minimum wage is, well, we'll just hire less people and we'll fire the ones we've hired already. The solution is more problems than it solves, always.
Right, so that's why the universal basic income is supposed to be the solution to these problems. Right?
So what's
and this is also why this automation, right? So there's lots of forks to these changes. The really big background idea here is that with automation comes radical economic and social changes. The whole way we organize our system is going to change radically. This shouldn't scare us too deeply, because everyone who's alive today have already lived through radical, and it's hard to overstate how radical these changes have been just over the last 20 years, 30 years. Right, the internet has radically changed human social organization. The introduction of cell phones, right, cheap portable computing, has changed how people organize their day, what people do with their day, and it's also changed the kind of jobs that are around. And so, yes, there are going to be radical changes going forward, but we've seen how these changes have already happened, and we've lived through them, so in some sense we're prepared, at least in that respect. Yeah, we've had to live through these radical changes before. So, I mean, let me just point out again the 4 parts of this pro-automation demanding the post-work future. Right, part of the idea here is that this is not a simple. Right, these changes are not simple. These changes have implications across multiple dimensions: technical, social, ethical, economic. Right, but it's not just chaos. We can have a systematic response that, if we maintain the systematic response, it addresses all of these concerns. It addresses the concerns, right? So less people are being hired. Well, that's okay, because everyone's getting universal basic income and can support themselves at a basic level, and no one really cares about the people who aren't working. Right? We don't stigmatize people who don't have jobs. Right? If that's the case, then it doesn't matter that not very many people have jobs. It's only a problem that people don't have jobs in an environment where people must have jobs in order to survive. Right? We have an economic system where if you don't work, you go hungry, and you can't feed and clothe and house yourself. Right? We live in a society where, because we have these policies, these strict policies that demand work, we've left millions, 20 million kids in poverty. In the United States, the richest country in the world, and we're keeping people in poverty because of the work ethics that we have, because of the values that we put over labor and work and money. So there's lots of things to debate here. There's lots of on both sides. There's pro and con arguments to Uber. There's pro and con arguments to the universal basic income. But hopefully this introduction gets you started on some of these questions. Let's make the word of the day. Let's make the word of the day Luddite. If you put Luddite into the word of the day into the sign-in sheet, you will get 10 credit for today. All right, I think that's it. Thanks everyone for showing up. Next week's our last week, so I'll see you then.